My name is Nadine Holloway. I am a project manager at a marketing firm in Chicago. 3 years ago, I thought people simply did not like me. Now I know it was planned. Mallory Quinn started it first. One Tuesday, at a morning meeting, she smiled and told the team, "Careful, don't tell Nadine anything personal." It somehow always gets awkward. My coworkers laughed. I had never talked about anyone behind their back. I remembered that laugh, not because it hurt, but because something had already started long before that morning. A few weeks later, a new hire joined the creative team, Tiffany. We talked in the kitchen about coffee and her new apartment. The next morning, she stopped speaking to me, took a different hallway whenever she saw me coming. She had sat in the conference room with Mallory the evening before. At the holiday party, I walked up to a group of coworkers by the bar. The conversation stopped mid-sentence. Mallory said quietly, not looking at me, "See, I told you she'd show up." I did not argue. I took a glass of wine and walked to the window, watching the lights on Michigan Avenue. On my desk sat a blue ceramic mug that read, "Kindness costs nothing." It was a gift from a department head who had left 2 years earlier. Mallory liked to walk past my desk and pick it up. She would turn it in her hands and set it back down with a thin smile. She never said anything while doing it. She did not need to. At my first annual review, my manager told me directly, "You should work on being more of a team player." I asked what he meant. He hesitated, said something about the general impression in the room, and never named a single example. At a quarterly meeting, I suggested an idea for a client campaign. Mallory repeated it 5 minutes later, in different words, and our manager praised her for it. I did not correct him. I only noted the date in a notebook. For 3 years, I showed up on time and did my share of every project without delay. I never filed a complaint. I only watched as an image formed around me. It was the image of someone people were better off keeping at a distance. I kept notes like that for almost a year, without fully knowing why. Just facts, no commentary. Date, place, what happened. Friday evenings usually ended the same way. I gathered my things, shut down my monitor, walked to the elevator alone. That evening did not follow the usual script. I had left my charger in a conference room on the 3rd floor. I went back for it around 6, once most people had gone. The door was half open, the lights still on. Mallory's laptop sat open on the table. She had probably stepped out and forgotten to lock it. Next to it stood a still warm cup of coffee, steam still rising above it. It was a group chat named Friday Wine Crew. I had no intention of reading anyone's private messages. But my name was the first word in the top message, and my eyes stopped on their own. "Don't invite Nadine. Half the office still believes she's the reason Rebecca quit, LOL." Below it ran a row of laughing emojis. I read it twice, to be sure I understood it correctly. My hands did not shake. My breathing did not change. Something in my chest simply went quiet. It was like a sound that had been playing in the background for 3 years. A sound I had finally stopped hearing. I scrolled up. There were messages from 3 years earlier, around the time I had first joined the company. The earliest rumors about me had been born in that very chat. Almost every one of them had been written by Mallory Quinn. Scrolling further, I found another message, a year older still. It was about a real estate presentation I had been publicly blamed for. Mallory had written in that chat, "Let Nadine answer for this one." I already told the client I built the slides. I remembered that day in detail, except for one thing. I had never been sure who actually built the slides. Now I knew. I had not built them. I had simply been placed in front of the client without warning. For a long time, I believed the failure was mine alone. I did not make a scene. I took out my phone, took one clean screenshot, and put it back in my pocket. I walked out of the room as quietly as I had come in. In the elevator, I looked at my reflection in the mirrored doors. My face was calm. Something inside me finally clicked into place. It felt like a puzzle piece held at the wrong angle for far too long. I sat at my kitchen table that night, not touching my tea until it went cold. I did not search for excuses for Mallory or try to understand her reasons. I simply let myself accept the fact. 3 years of questions finally had an answer. Why new hires avoided me within their first weeks. Why my ideas sometimes came back in someone else's voice, and that voice got the credit. Why a room would go quiet when I walked in unannounced. That evening, I did not decide to get revenge. I decided to stop letting anything slip past my attention. The next morning, I applied for the Emerging Leaders Track, the company's internal leadership program. I did it before I even finished my coffee. I told no one about it, just started staying late twice a week. I started taking on projects other people tried to avoid. A pharmacy chain contract had been stuck for 2 months over budget disagreements. I mapped out a new timeline and negotiated separately with the client and with finance. The project closed 2 weeks ahead of schedule, and the finance director sent my manager a note about it. I saved that email in a folder of its own. The leadership program ended with a final project, a restructuring plan presented to a panel of 3 executives. I chose the kind of operational process that would later become the core of my future role. I told no one at the office how it went. I kept the results letter in the same folder as the screenshot. A month later, the company announced a reorganization. 3 departments were merging into one, with a new role, Operations Director, reporting directly to the CEO. I applied quietly through the internal system. Cynthia from HR ran the first interview. A week later, Julian Mercer, a senior director, ran the second. Julian had a habit I noticed at our first meeting. Before starting any conversation, he lined up every pen on the desk into one straight row, in silence. He spoke little, asked precisely, and cared only about numbers and results. At the end, he asked one non-numerical question. Why did I still work at a company with so much internal politics? I told him politics had never affected the quality of my work, only how it was perceived. He nodded once and wrote something down. I later learned Julian had personally asked finance to prepare a report comparing my numbers to department averages. He never told me. That gap, according to Cynthia, became one of the main arguments in my favor. A week later, I met the CEO himself. It lasted 20 minutes. 3 days after that, I received an offer for the operations director role. They asked me to keep it confidential until the announcement. I signed the contract that evening at the kitchen table. It was the same table where I had studied the screenshot a month earlier. I hid it in a drawer at home, under old tax documents. Mallory began noticing changes she could not quite name. One day she picked up the blue mug, set it back down, and asked, "Everything okay? You've become quiet lately." I answered with one word, "Busy." She waited a second, as if hoping for more. Then she walked back to her own desk, a little slower than usual. The announcement came on a Monday, in the large hall on the second floor. Nearly 60 people gathered. The CEO thanked the team for a difficult year and spoke about the new structure. Then he paused and said, "The new operations director, Nadine Holloway." A few gasps rose from the room. I stood in the third row, kept my back straight, looked straight ahead. Julian, standing by the wall with a cup of coffee, was the only executive who did not look surprised. Mallory sat 2 rows behind me. I did not look at her on purpose. But from the corner of my eye, I caught the smile disappearing from her face. She started clapping first among everyone, mechanically, a beat late. After the general meeting, HR called a separate meeting for our department. It turned out one manager had already filed a complaint about the department's atmosphere a week earlier, without naming names. Cynthia asked the room if anyone had information that could help explain the roots of the problem. Nobody spoke. I took out my phone. "You asked why several employees stopped trusting each other," I said. "This is part of the answer." I showed the screenshot, the message about Rebecca, the date beneath it. I handed the phone to Cynthia without another word. Julian, Cynthia, 3 managers, and Mallory herself were in the room. Cynthia slowly took off her glasses, wiped the lenses with her sleeve, and read the message again in silence. Julian sat closest to the door, arms folded, watching every face without moving. Devon, a junior manager, said quietly, "Wait, she started all of this." No one answered him, but a few heads nodded. Priya took the phone, checked the date, compared it against something in her own notes, and shook her head. "Last year I asked HR why turnover in our department was higher than average," she said. "I never got a clear answer then. Now it seems fairly obvious." Mallory said nothing, only tightened her hands in her lap. Julian closed his black notebook and said, "This explains several resignations over the years." His voice was flat, without any drama, and that made the words land harder than any shout could have. Mallory tried to speak. "It was just office humor," she said. "We all joked like that." Her voice cracked on the last word. Nobody backed her, not with a nod, not with a sound. A few seconds passed with nothing but the hum of the air conditioner. I stood up first, thanked everyone, and walked into the hallway with a steady stride. 3 days later, Mallory came to my new office and asked for a few minutes. She sat down without waiting to be asked, her eyes sliding sideways, unable to look straight at me. She said we had both been younger when it started, that the past could stay in the past. Then she asked me not to hand the material to the disciplinary committee, said it could cost her the job. I answered briefly, "I did nothing against you. I simply stopped hiding what you did." She found nothing to add, sat there a few seconds longer, then turned and left. The committee reviewed the case over 2 weeks. Mallory received a formal warning and lost her quarterly bonus. A month later, she resigned herself, before the follow-up review even finished. On her last day, she walked past my desk carrying a small box of personal things. The same blue mug sat there, "Kindness costs nothing," now in a new office. I was drinking coffee from it, calmly, without looking up. She paused for a second, as if she wanted to say something, then looked away and walked to the elevator. Lies can live for years if nobody shows the truth. But the truth does not need to shout. One precise moment is enough. 3 years of silence taught me one thing: facts carry more weight than explanations ever could. If you silently endured rumors like that for 3 years, then became the boss of the person who spread them, would you have stayed quiet too, or done something different?